Welcome back to the 2025 APAICS Energy and Commerce Summit. I'm Tanya Layden, Vice President of Development and External Affairs. Our next APAICS Energy and Commerce Summit panel is the evolving demand and landscape of energy production. As Asian Americans continue to lead in the early adoption of AI and other emerging technologies, the demand on the energy infrastructure from the use of these technologies is rapidly increasing. This panel will explore how the rise of AI, cryptocurrencies, and domestic manufacturing is reshaping energy consumption, straining current power grids, and driving innovations needed for a sustainable and equitable future. I am pleased to introduce CAPAC Associate Member, Congresswoman Deborah Ross, who represents North Carolina's 2nd Congressional District. In the 119th Congress, Congresswoman Ross serves as a ranking member on the Energy Subcommittee and is also a member of the Environment Subcommittee. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Ross to the Energy and Commerce Summit.
Hello, I'm Congresswoman Deborah Ross. I represent part of the Research Triangle area of North Carolina, home to many companies on the cutting edge of technology and innovation across industries. Our state is so laser focused on expanding our energy production, including renewable offshore wind energy. I know I don't have to tell you all about the importance of energy infrastructure at this time of technological change. Thankfully, today's panelists are here to provide their insights. They'll address how we can meet the moment and produce enough energy to meet our growing technology demands. New technologies from AI to quantum computing and chips manufacturing will only continue to expand and require more and more energy. We must make sure that as this happens, we're transitioning our energy economy in a way that is inclusive and just. The AA-NHPI community plays a critical role in this endeavor. And I'm glad to see APAICS addressing this dilemma head on. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful panel.
Thank you for those remarks, Congresswoman Ross. I'm excited to introduce our panel moderator, Jeanette Pablo. Jeanette is the founder and CEO of the Climate Equity Foundation and is also a co-founder and vice president of the Asian Americans in Energy, the Environment, and Commerce. Please give a warm welcome to our moderator, Jeanette, and our group of panelists.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Pablo, the moderator for this panel, and also CEO of the Climate Equity Foundation, where we work at the intersection of climate change and environmental justice. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our panel, The Evolving Demand and Landscape of Energy Production. It's my pleasure to briefly introduce our panelists. Norman Bay is a partner in corporate and financial services at the law firm of Willkie, Farr, and Gallagher. Lashelle Johnson is Senior Director of State Climate and Equity Policy at the League of Conservation Voters. Alia Hidayat is the Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for American Progress. And Yvonne McIntyre is the Vice President of Federal Affairs at PG&E Corporation. Before we go into our questions, I'd just like to offer a few statistics on who are American Asians, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. There are about 26.8 million people who identify as Asian American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, making up about 6.2% of the nation's population. We are, in fact, the most diverse population in the US, consisting of approximately 70 distinct ethnic groups and speaking over, individually, 100 language dialects. 61% of the Asian American population, aged 25 and older, hold a bachelor's degree or higher, this is from 2023, compared to 38.6% of all people in this age group in the United States. It's also important to remember that Asian Americans are overrepresented in low-paying occupations. Last 2 points are the 119th Congress, that's this one right now, also includes 25 members of Asian and Pacific Islander descent, including 82 members of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. And lastly, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders represent more than 8% of federal judges. So let's dive in. Norman, there are so many dynamics at play, such as the role and projections for oil and gas in the US and projected electricity demand due to growth in data centers, onshoring manufacturing, and electrification exponential. Could you provide an overview of the current energy transition to sort of set the stage for us, please?
Sure. Thanks, Jeanette. I'm happy to try to set the stage here. So where are we now? For oil and gas, the United States remains the largest producer of both of those commodities. And that's been the case for about the last decade. For electricity, the generation mix has evolved pretty dramatically from 2013 to 2023. The biggest changes have come in natural gas, which increased from 27% to 43% of the electricity in the United States. Coal, on the other hand, decreased from 39% to 16%. And both of those statistics are really because of fracking, right? Fracking also led to the United States becoming the largest producer of oil and natural gas. Renewables over that same 10-year time period went from about 14% of the generation mix to 21%. So that currently about 40% of the electricity in the United States is carbon-free. One of the other really noteworthy developments is that the price of batteries dropped by about 90% over the last decade. And in 2024, more than 11 gigawatts of utility-scale batteries were installed on the grid. Just to give the audience a frame of reference there, a gigawatt of electricity is about the amount of electricity needed to power a city of several 100,000 people. So that's a lot of battery storage.
Yeah.
Then there continue to be significant efforts to develop and deploy innovation, including fusion reactors, and we've all seen the articles on attempts to develop that technology. Small modular reactors, solid-state batteries, geothermal technology, grid-enhancing technologies, hydrogen electrolyzers, and digital demand response platforms. Now, as you mentioned, Jeanette, one of the biggest developments that has happened recently has been some pretty dramatic load growth, and that's because of AI and data centers, electrification, and domestic commercial and industrial demand. In December 2024, DOE issued a report that noted that in 2023, about 4.4% of load in the United States was used by data centers, which is a lot of electricity, right? But this report also said that by 2028, that load used by data centers could increase to 6.7% to 12% of all load in the United States. So that's just a lot of electricity being used by data centers. So one of the big challenges, as we'll discuss today, is meeting that dramatic load growth while keeping the grid reliable, affordable, and sustainable. The other thing I would note is that on the policy front, there's a lot of uncertainty right now at the federal level, and that's a result of the BBB, which, as you know, rolled back tax credits for renewables. States, however, continue to support clean energy through their own policies and RPS standards. So overall, a lot is happening. The policy headwinds may slow the transition somewhat over the next few years.
Great job. And thank you so much for that in-depth analysis. So, Lashelle, founded in 1970, the League of Conservation Voters believes that our Earth is worth fighting for because everyone has a right to clean air, water, and a safe and healthy community. What are some of LCV's top priorities to achieve these goals, and share maybe some of the strategies at the state and federal levels over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. The 1,000-foot view of LCV's work nationally is that we win elections to pass policies that protect people and our planet. At both the state and federal level, we work with elected officials, we build and mobilize grassroots power in communities, and we advocate for nation-leading clean energy policy. In 2017, we launched the Clean Energy for All program, or the campaign, with our 30 independent state affiliates. It was our flagship state program, which has as its North Star the goal of ensuring everyone in the nation it lives in a place that's committed to 100% clean energy. When we started the program, it was 1% of people lived in a place committed to 100% clean energy, and now it's 40. So we've done a lot of work in just under a decade, both at the State House, but also in regulatory venues and through local governments. So coming back to your question about what are our priorities, what are our strategies in the next 5 to 10 years, I think top of mind is we want to connect people with our issue, right? We want to ensure that people know we're fighting shoulder to shoulder with them to protect communities, to combat the energy affordability crisis, and to safeguard our democracy. And then, as Norman was saying earlier, it's go, go, go in the states, right? We have a state program. It is our flagship work. We have 30 independent state affiliates. So that's where we're on offense on climate, right? So that means politics. We also do politics. So you're thinking the 38 governors races, but it also means policy. So we've gotten 100% clean commitments in 20 states, dozens of cities. And beyond that, we have very strong advocacy at all levels of the power sector, including robust work at places like utility commissions, where we fight for climate progress through a representative participatory democracy. We have an incredibly strong network across the nation with our 30 state affiliates, all working to secure positive policy progress toward cutting emissions and protecting our communities. But we are really leaning into that intersection of climate and democracy work there. And then the last thing I'll say is that we want to set ourselves up to be able to legislate on climate federally in 2029, right? Nothing is a foregone conclusion, good or bad. So we'll continue working as hard as we always do to get champs elected and to pass bold, equitable climate policies that ensure that we're doing our part to stymie and remediate the harms that are caused by our historically extractive energy system.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring. So, Alia, in order to achieve a swift clean energy transition, managing trade-offs will be difficult and critical. How do you balance the need for the rapid deployment of clean energy, especially wind and solar, which requires critical minerals, land demands, along conservation and social goals?
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. I'd say, first of all, just to be clear, renewable energy like wind and solar definitely has pros and cons like any other energy source. But by and large, the trade-offs are overwhelmingly dwarfed by the benefits of moving away from fossil fuels and associated pollution and sort of other environmental impacts. I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective as someone who works on clean energy, but on a conservation-focused team. And for me, those goals are by and large one and the same. If you care about biodiversity, if you care about ecosystems and the people that rely on them, what we really need is a fast, clean energy transition. That's not to say that when you zoom in on a smaller scale, there aren't significant sort of local acute impacts. Renewable energy, again, specifically talking here about wind and solar, have a big, very visible land usage, often in places that may not have had development previously. And so that can create conflicts between local communities and with wildlife. That in turn can generate opposition, that can cancel or slow projects. So it's really not a solution to ignore this conflict and really requires sort of a nuanced solution. There's this really tricky tension then between sort of the urgent need to build things quickly, but also wanting to slow down and make sure it's done well or done responsibly. Again, there's really sort of a lot of dimensions to this, and it's really tricky. But there's also a lot of really cool creative thinking on this front. And part of my work at CAP is to help figure out what works and make sure that policy can better support those actions. Each of these could be its own dissertation, but I'll just go over some of the main high-level strategies for sort of managing that balance. But first of all is minimizing the impact. So as Norm said, we have sort of these large goals about how many gigawatts do we need to meet demand. How do we, as much as possible, meet that with sort of low impact or low small footprint renewables? How can we creatively use innovative like new technology, like grid enhancing technologies, battery storage to reduce the amount of overbuilding that we have to do to meet demand? Overall, how do we think creatively about minimizing that impact? Secondly, once we have a sense of how much capacity we need to build, how do we make sure that we're siting it in sort of the best, most responsible places? This means knowing what to say no to, so building in sort of critical habitat, culturally sensitive areas, but also knowing what to say yes to. So that is, for example, there's tons of disturbed lands across the US. We're talking about landfills, abandoned mines, parking lots, contaminated areas. That could be a real opportunity to bring clean energy as well as revenues and other benefits to communities if we can figure out how to make it cheaper and easier to do so. So this will probably require some mix of sort of proactive planning, incentives, smart siting, and permitting policy, lots of different strategies in order to get us there. And while it probably won't fix everything, helping move to those already disturbed areas will definitely take pressure off of greenfield development and sort of those more pristine areas. And then third of all, community engagement and benefits. The areas that I mentioned that may be the most responsible or the most technically feasible places to build may not necessarily be the places with social license to build. For example, we're seeing community opposition and restrictive local laws being just a huge barrier to the clean energy built out across the country. And to address that, again, is challenging, but we really need to work on sort of trust in developers and building social license by ensuring that sort of impacts on vulnerable communities are mitigated as much as possible, avoiding impacts on sort of important or culturally sensitive areas. Benefits for communities are maximized and equally distributed where possible. And at the same time, making sure that projects that have benefits for whole communities as well, or for society as a whole, aren't blocked by a vocal minority. And then last thing here really quickly is once you've minimized all of those other scenarios, if you have to build on greenfield areas, what are ways that we can sort of improve outcomes for nature? What are sort of mitigation scenarios that we can do in order to recoup sort of ecosystem losses? And how do we make sure that that's communicated effectively to industry and it's predictable?
Thank you. That was very comprehensive, which is exactly what we need in this space. So thank you very much. Yvonne, many of us look to California for innovation and progress at in the energy transition. Can you talk a little bit about PG&E's strategy for meeting growing electricity demand and achieving climate goals while keeping low-income communities from being left behind?
Great, thanks, Jeanette. I want to start off by noting that Pacific Gas and Electric Company is one of the largest utilities in the United States. We provide electricity and gas service to over 16 million people over 70,000 square mile service territory across Northern and Central California. Our service territory is incredibly diverse in terms of both physical geography and demographics. 12% of our customers identify as Asian American. So, we have a very kind of interesting footprint across Northern and Central California. As with utilities across the country, PG&E definitely is facing increasing energy demand. And, we are looking at it from a perspective of not just data center growth, AI data center growth, and actually people sometimes don't think that AI data centers are coming to California, but they are, and we're serving them. But we have always, in the past decade or so, been seeing increased demand from electrification. We have tremendous growth in electric vehicle deployment, and we are really moving towards electrifying buildings and homes. And so we have estimated that by 2040, electrification is expected to increase our load by 50% of total system sales and 13% at our peak load. As far as electric vehicles, we serve over 740,000 EVs in our service territory. And we have a goal to serve 3 million by 2030, although as Norman, cited the One Big Beautiful Bill, that is going to impact the trajectory of EV deployment, but we're still hoping to move towards that. As far as data centers, we have received applications totaling 8.7 gigawatts of new load, and we expect 1.4 gigawatts of that new load to be online as soon as next year, 2026. So we're facing all of that unprecedented growth, but at the same time, we are remaining committed to our climate goals. We have a goal to be net zero by 2040, which is 4 years before the state of California's goal. And we're meeting those climate goals already. Last year in 2024, we delivered 98% greenhouse gas-free electricity to our customers, and that was from a combination of renewables, hydropower, and nuclear. Other ways that we are helping meet the clean energy and climate goals are through programs like energy efficiency, demand response. Both of those help both reduce the amount of energy used, thereby avoiding the CO2 emissions related to that, and then balancing the supply and demand of electricity in California. We've installed more than 3,800 new electric vehicle charging ports throughout our system, and we've increased the amount of renewable natural gas in our system. And so what are we doing to try and meet our increasing demand while staying true to our climate goals? One of the big things that we're doing is load management solutions. And this is, right now, we know California, it's very difficult to build anything new. And so adding more capacity through any type of generation plant, it takes a while, and it's not going to, happen anytime soon. And so we're looking at load management solutions where we'll shift customer loads to better utilize renewables when they're online. And so it decreases peak demand and reduces the need for supply, transmission, and distribution build out. Other strategies that we're using to employ load management are using existing distributed energy resources in the system. So microgrids and batteries, we're utilizing those in different manners, including using them as virtual power plants. So we actually will be able to use the capacity of existing batteries, electric vehicles to be able to supply power to the grid, thereby again, lessening the need for new capacity to be built out. And so we've piloted several electric vehicle to grid programs. So we're working with Tesla, GM, Ford on some of those to ensure that they have the right technology. We have the ability to be able to call on vehicles whenever they're needed. And we, are looking at other ways to continue to add clean energy resources to our portfolio. So that includes, adding more batteries, increasing our hydropower capacity. And one of the big things was our nuclear plant, Diablo Canyon Power Plant, was supposed to shut down by the end of this year. We got a new lease on life on that. And so that will be able to continue to operate and provide greenhouse gas-free electricity for some time. And how are we doing this to make sure that, low-income communities aren't left behind? Some of the ways that, particularly to allow or to help low-income communities take part in, being able to buy EVs or, install renewables in their system, we have a pre-owned EV rebate program, so providing incentives for people to go out and buy, lower cost EVs. We have a low-income solar program, and once again, providing financial incentives to install photovoltaic cells at their homes or in multifamily homes. And then particularly, we have, and it's not unique anymore, it's kind of spreading throughout the country, but we face high wildfire threats throughout our service territory. And so we're looking at, in those high wildfire threat districts, providing incentives for those communities or homes to, purchase renewable, residential renewable resources so that they can self-generate. We're developing a just transition plan for how we will achieve our net energy system in a way that's inclusive, creates job opportunities, and leaves no one behind by engaging in dialogue and partnerships with our communities. And then we're also looking at ways that AI can help through all these processes, identifying the needs where we, can manage our load better, where added capacity is really needed, reducing emissions, stabilizing bills, and providing enhanced customer service. So we're taking lots of different actions to, again, ensure that we're able to meet the load, stay true to our clean energy goals, as well as ensuring that our communities are taken care of.
Thank you for that information and appreciate the preview of the company. So, all right, so let's go back to Norman. All critical infrastructure, oil, transportation, communications and IT, water, natural gas, and finance depends upon the electricity grid. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges and opportunities to the grid over the next decade?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeanette. And frankly, I'd love to hear the views of Lashelle, Alia, and Yvonne to that question. And maybe they'll have an opportunity to respond as well. And really, their remarks, I think, touched on those challenges and opportunities, right? I think one of the big challenges is going to be meeting future load, as Yvonne noted. So with this dramatic load increase that to a large extent is being driven by AI in data centers, how do you meet that load growth while keeping electricity reliable, affordable, and sustainable, right? So this is a major challenge, I think. Something else I would mention, and this is on my personal list, I don't know if others would agree, but one of the challenges in my view is the politicization of energy. That was not always the case, but you see that happening more and more often. And that politicization, unfortunately, has resulted in a certain amount of policy uncertainty, as we've seen in this really dramatic reversal of the IRA to the BBB. And that's a problem for the energy industry because, as everyone on this panel knows, these investments are very capital intensive. It costs a lot of money to build a big power generator, whether it's thermal, solar, or wind. And these projects aren't built overnight. They take years to develop. And so when you get a major policy reversal, it really kind of scrambles the plans of utilities and developers. And that's bad because ultimately it results in higher costs for consumers and a less reliable grid. So that's a second challenge. A third challenge is, in spite of, in leaving aside even the policy uncertainties, what you alluded to, Jeanette, and that is the difficulty in getting infrastructure built. And several of the panelists mentioned that as well. And it's difficult, whether it's generation or transmission. Lawrence Livermore, Berkeley National Lab, estimated that in 2024, there were 2,600 gigawatts of generators stuck in interconnection queues around the United States. So what's an interconnection queue? It's the process that utilities use to allow a generator essentially to plug into the grid. So how much generation is 2,600 gigawatts of generation? Essentially, that is twice as much generation as currently powers the grid, which is somewhere in the high 1,200 gigawatt range. So that's how many projects are waiting to interconnect. Now, not all those projects are real. Some of them are speculative, but that's a lot of generation that is backed up, trying to be developed, trying to interconnect to the grid. Now, FERC has taken some steps to streamline the interconnection process to make it more efficient. I think over time that will help, but this gives you an idea of how hard it is to build this needed infrastructure at a time when demand is surging. And then, of course, there's transmission, which is super hard to build. I mean, I think any transmission project is going to take about a decade to build. I see Yvonne nodding her head, and that's understandable. But we really need that transmission. It is very helpful in delivering renewable energy to load, or any kind of energy, frankly, to load. And it improves the reliability and the resilience of the grid as well, so that when you get an extreme weather event, If it hammers one part of the United States, a different region can send power to that region. So I would say that is a third challenge, that is the difficulty building big infrastructure. And finally, I would say extreme weather events, which I just mentioned. Science is telling us that extreme weather events are becoming more frequent and more severe. So the kind of event that once might have been thought to be a once in 100-year event, that's now happening once a decade or once every few years. And that puts utilities in a very difficult position because they have this fundamental requirement to keep the lights on, and yet they have to deal with extreme weather events and the challenges that poses to distribution systems, but also to the grid writ large. So all of those challenges, though, create opportunities, as everyone in the panel has already basically mentioned. My own view is that policy can create a headwind or tailwind, but it has difficulty stopping powerful economic forces, innovation, or consumer preference. And when you look at innovation, so much is happening that these immense demands for energy are providing investment opportunities. And so a lot of capital is being devoted to trying to develop better batteries, like solid state batteries that are more energy dense than the lithium ion batteries we now have. Geothermal technologies continuing to evolve with attempts to basically use techniques for fracking for natural gas being used for geothermal. Small modular reactors, there seems to be a lot of interest in SMR, so we'll see whether the nuclear renaissance actually happens in this decade. There's even a lot of interest in fusion technology. That's like the home run, right, if you manage to pull that one off. Then I would say that the innovation also includes the efficiencies that can be unlocked through the use of AI and machine learning. So while AI may use up a lot of power, it is possible that it will lead to innovation, or that data centers can become grid resources if they're able to ramp back their usage during certain times. So those are possibilities as well. Then to pick up on something that Yvonne mentioned, I would say that energy and efficiency, demand response, distributed energy resources, virtual power plants, all of that is really important now, right? Because if you can't build the big stuff, then maybe you should start looking at resources that are behind the meter, right? And demand response and load side management is great because that means you don't even have to build a power plant. The thing about an electricity system is that for utility, they have to meet demand at any moment in time. And if they can't meet demand, right, then you have a problem. You can have blackouts. So instead of building a generator, if you could get people to dial back their energy usage, then maybe you don't need that, what they call a peaker, which is literally a inefficient, more expensive, higher emitting facility that only operates a few times out of the year. So if you can get people and businesses to dial back their energy usage, there's tremendous value to that. So I'm very pleased to hear about what PG&E is doing to try to promote the use of demand response, load side management, DER, and virtual power plants. Another opportunity, I think, is that there is growing recognition of the importance of transmission, right? And so I think, FERC has taken steps to try to promote better transmission planning and cost allocation. So we'll see whether that actually results in more transmission getting built, especially the big inter-regional lines that can provide some of the greatest benefit, but which are absolutely the hardest to build. Even though, right, every study by NREL has shown that for those big lines, the benefit to cost ratio is like 2 to 3 to 1, right? So you're actually more than getting your money back if you build that transmission line. And finally, I would say another opportunity is that for states, once again, there's an opportunity to demonstrate leadership on energy policy and really to be, the drivers of innovation on the policy front.
You took my breath away. And I would like to start by maybe going a little off-road and invite any of our other panelists to respond to that question. If you would like to do so, let me know. If you want a few minutes, we can go ahead with the other questions and then we can circle back. Any preferences?
It's hard to follow Norman. He really covered a lot
Right,
of
he
ground.
covered everything.
I know. We're all just stunned and taking it all in. I wish I had written all my notes, but since we're recorded, we can still have it. Well, why don't we pause on that one and go to a couple more questions and then we can circle back. So, Lashelle, what is your favorite story about how everyday people are getting engaged and making a difference? We've been kind of at the top, you know, with the grid and the impacts and things like that. But, you know, in the end, it's individual people who are experiencing the electricity system and our energy transition. So I would love to hear your story if you're willing to tell us.
Yeah. It's a great local story. It's also like slightly wonky, but slightly not, in that it's called the People's Power Union in Georgia. Was stood up by our Georgia Conservation Voters Education Fund, and it's basically an organizing vehicle for all of Georgia Power, their local utilities customers, to skill up on how to get involved, how to work at the Public Service Commission. What does it look like? Because traditionally, public service commissions are so inaccessible. They're so opaque. And so like it's quasi-judicial. It can be really hard to get community members to show up because it's intimidating to step into those rooms full of energy lawyers and engineers and like tell your story and own your story. So the People's Power Union was set up as a coalition, a vehicle of community leaders and community members to learn about the energy system, to learn about Georgia Power, to learn about the Public Service Commission, to learn about integrated resource planning and long-term resource planning, and to know how to get involved when. It takes a little bit of the onus off of people for knowing when the commission meetings are and what they're talking about and when it's useful for you to say something, or when is the public hearing versus closed hearings? When are the interveners only allowed to show up? So I think it's a really great, for me, it's a really great story because it's convening everyone in Georgia Power's district in their venue, and giving them the tools, bringing them together, galvanizing them in a direction to get involved and feel ownership over the Public Service Commission in Georgia, to feel like they have agency and access to the decision-making spaces, especially because those decision-making spaces are making decisions for them and on their behalf. So I just love a story when you're bringing people together, giving them the information, the tools needed in order for them to take the ownership of, like in Georgia, they're elected, their commissioners are elected, right? So like taking the ownership of this space where these people that you've elected are making decisions for you, and not feeling like there's that barrier or feeling afraid to get involved or uncertain about owning your story when it sounds like everyone else is just talking in the deep weeds about all of the very technical details that maybe you didn't learn before. So that's my favorite story that's happening right now in Georgia.
Okay, I think that's my new favorite story because, you know, I work a lot with communities, and everybody's talking about the communities need to get more engaged, et cetera, about energy. But like, how do you do that? That's, you know, adding a whole nother job. So that story is, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So Yvonne, many people, you talked a little bit in your earlier comments on AI, the advantages as well as challenges. It's really so top of mind, and I expect you probably are pretty much of an expert at PG&E there. But can you talk a little bit about AI, and is it a problem for the electricity sector? Is it a magic wand, maybe someplace in between? Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do look at AI as being more of a problem than actually being beneficial as far as the sector is concerned, right? Because they just think, oh my God, it's like, how are you going to serve the load? And, is it going to increase, emissions now? Because what are you using to power the AI data centers? And so again, we're looking at it from the perspective of we can meet the needs of AI with clean energy. We're already doing it. We've already shown that we can do it. And again, not to say that we don't need to add more capacity in the state to continue to meet that, but it is possible to meet the need with clean energy. And so, but on the other hand, like AI can help. As I said, we were already using it to analyze, kind of where like the coming bad weather is, where the wildfire risks are, using it internally. Like we have the first, deploy the first like commercial AI process at our nuclear power plant to kind of really look for greater efficiencies in our just like records management. And so identifying ways that you can streamline and make your operations much more efficient. It will help in the future too of as I said, our load management process to kind of really identify and working with our customers of like, when do you really need the most power? So AI, I mean, everybody looks at AI too as just saying like, we need to be on, 24/7 and there's just no way that, we can have any blip in service. Well, not all data centers are going to be that way. And so, let's work with our customers to identify when you really do need to have that peak load, that peak period, what time of year, what time of day, so that we can kind of manage and determine when it is right for you to kind of be coming online. Because probably during the day when we have so much solar in our system and we're dumping power, to kind of balance our system, and just any other kind of ways that it can be utilized to identify where new capacity will be needed, where it makes sense for a data center to locate. I mean, everybody, they all think they want to be like closest to, we power Silicon Valley, right? So they all need to be there. There's a lot of space in Central Valley, so that, identifying, the proper places for things to be located, for capacity to be added, for managing load. It will help then to identify opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So when you're again being able to manage when we're ramping up, ramping down, the type of energy that's needed, the times that it's needed. And so there are many beneficial uses for AI. I was recently at a meeting with the head of the International Energy Agency. And they've done a study, and basically they're saying that in the future, AI will be able to be used to actually reduce the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with this increased demand for energy to power AI. So it's not all bad. We're excited about the possibilities to be able to use it to help our operations.
Very persuasive. So one last question, Alia. So our wrap up, why is it important that members of the AA, NH, and PI communities have a seat at the table when creating policy for the energy transition?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to keep it kind of short, it's important for our communities to be involved and at the table because we bring unique values, we bring our own relationships, places that are important to us, all of these things that inform how the energy transition happens, and what kinds of things we want to protect and preserve and prioritize. I think that the continent will be really critical as both a place where climate impacts are acutely felt, but also a place where a lot of the solutions will be sort of born out of, and where emissions management and all these other solutions are really critical. And I think that having members of our community at the table can help build bridges, ensure equity, and make sure that's an effective transition. The sort of second thing that I'll say is that I think in the US environmental movement, we're getting better at recognizing some of the environmental justice impacts of our sort of historic energy system, and how they impact sort of acute communities within the US, though we still have a long way to go. But there has been sort of maybe like fundamentally or by nature, there's less of a focus on sort of diffuse impacts that might impact people across the world. And I think that our community is particularly sensitive to some of those issues. For example, my family is from Indonesia. It's extremely vulnerable to climate impacts like sea level rise, extreme heat, and some of those other impacts. And at least for me, that makes this work very personal, very motivating, and very urgent. And I think that that's a unique perspective, and I think it's something that's important and valuable to have, and something that is important for our communities to be able to show up and bring that perspective to the table.
Thank you very much. So I think our time is up. Please join me in thanking our panel and the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. I really appreciate all your time, your work, and sharing your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you all for a fantastic day of learning and discussion. We've had such valuable insights into the evolving landscape of transportation, manufacturing, food access, and energy production. Once again, I want to thank our incredible summit partners, Amazon, Toyota, the Gates Foundation, Cargill, Coca-Cola, Delta, NRDC, and PG&E, as well as all of our speakers, panelists, and moderators for their time and dedication. Please make sure to visit www.apaics.org to learn more about our work. Thank you all for being part of this year's Energy and Commerce Summit, and I look forward to continuing these important conversations in the future.